Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream for the Restituta Orbis channel, with this week's topic being portals. We're going to discuss portals to see exactly how it may be a bit of a linking point for a lot of our theories, and we'll talk about how it links back to many different theories and for why we have certain architectural styles that may be appearing in certain areas in the timeline. It might also give us some explanation for why we have some of the things that we observe in our explorations that we do. And portals are always very interesting. And the first thing we want to do, though, is understand exactly what we're talking about when we talk about portals. Now, I want to extend a greeting to all viewers, all Prime Explorers, all channel members, all others joining us, and everyone is welcome to be here. So, what exactly are portals? And I've got one of the most obvious examples that we tend to think of, although there's many different ways to visualize portals, and that's what we'll talk about. So, what are your thoughts on what portals are? And let's see what we've got. Yeah, agree, Robert. Definitely one of the keys. Hey, Sovereign Invisible Untraceable, thanks for joining us. Golden Child, welcome. Well, thanks for joining us, Aaron's Energy. Traversable wormholes. Yeah, that's right, Jamie. That's one way to look at it. We will be talking about wormholes. You got it, Miguel. Definitely. It's a possibility to travel to areas faster. It could also talk about access to different points, whether we're talking reality, space, or time. Yeah, that's could be one way to look at it, Kathy, depending on what your view of spatial existence is, whether we're looking at planets or planes or other realities. If you found a portal you'd stuff you through. Couldn't resist, right, Cecilia? I probably couldn't either. Hey, Kryptonautic, good to see you. Terminals, yeah, that's a good way to describe it, Cyborg Ninja. Absolutely. Good to see you, brother Adam Baum, and thank you for that wonderful footage that showed that interesting construction technique. Oh, Peter, it's like you're looking ahead. Yes, Tesseract, Wrinkle in Time. That was one of the ways to look at it. So, some other ways to look at portals. This is probably one of the most, how shall we say, mainstream ways that people are introduced to portals. The concept of the wormhole or a spaceship. Just bear with me here. It's not to say that I dismiss the notion of space. It just might be something different than what we think of it as. But here's how it's told to many of us. A ship goes into a black hole, it traverses a wormhole, and it comes out a white hole in a completely different space or time. There's a couple movies on it, and we'll talk about those examples. But what are some of the ways that you've seen these introduced to you? Granite has a connection to them. That's very interesting, Jamie. And that could well be possible. We do see that building material a lot. We've already dived in, haven't we, Alan? Ooh, look at that, Robert, going to the internal perception of it. Yes, different consciousnesses. So there's many different ways to look at how portals allow us to access different portions of our mind. Hey, Elusive Truth, thanks for joining us. I believe that what we call portals are actually just a matter of perception. We only see a small fraction of the spectrum. Very true. And I certainly agree with that, whether that's the spatial perspective, how real time may be, or what kind of reality that we're actually in. Yeah, no doubt, reality checkmate. You do see a couple good examples in the Star Trek franchise. No real surprise there. But this is the way a lot of us are introduced to it, the concept of the black hole, the white hole, the wormhole, the ship traveling from point A to point B. But, frequency portals. Absolutely, Alan. And frequency might play a very key role in facilitating that. We do have a section that we're going to look at with portal technology called Heavens in the Bible. Yeah, maybe. And then there's also an opposite to that, if you will, called hell. And yes, we're going to talk about that in this as well. Hey, Laura. Yeah, Rainbow Bridge. I've heard that terminology as well. Supposedly, each portal has a frequency, and to travel through it, you need a correctly tuned key. Absolutely, PJCC West. And you see that in many of the stories about portals. Yes, the vid with the plane going through and the orbs. That's a good one. So many different examples. You ever feel like you went through one on a misty night driving down the road? Yes, many times, Wendy. And just going to different areas, whether you're flying, driving, or however you're traveling, even if you're walking, sometimes you can feel like you go across something on the land. So, a couple different ways to look at it. Portals to various parts of Middle Earth as well. See, all these wonderful examples. I almost feel like I don't even have to share the examples with you, but don't worry, I'm still going to. Many of the boats we see in these Egyptian hieroglyphics are also considered portals by many scholarships and interpreters. Yes, and it's also referred to often in architecture that we explore. Hey, RB, this knowledge has been occulted from the majority humanity. Yes, very likely. And you see it represented in many forms of fiction as well. There's no doubt about it. So let's look at some other examples as we go forward when we're thinking about portals. Now, this is kind of the general image that you have, whether it's you want to think of it as a whirlpool, you want to think of it as what we used to think of as a black hole, although it should be noted that in our more modern interpretation of black holes, at least what the mainstream science has told us, they've shown us something that is akin to the film Interstellar. We've got an example of it. We'll look at it with the sphere and a different form of space within that sphere, although how accurate any of these are is open to debate. It's always interesting to me that when we look at space, I'm always surprised at how two-dimensional objects appear to both the naked eye and the telescope, but that could just be a visual effect. But yes, this is what we thought of as portals, black holes, the gateway to wormholes. Hell does not exist. The lake of fire that burns up both body and soul exists. We don't burn forever. We're mercifully taken out quickly. Perhaps. Or there's other ways to look at it. Hey, Sarah Ann Smith, good to see you. You're not the first to say that, and I've got a feeling you're not going to be the last one to say that, Albie. Hey, good to see you, Y Superstars. Thanks for joining us. And so, moving on, some other examples that we have of portals. This is another way to look at it. And here you're looking at more of the sky portal. Now, we did talk about sky portals in one of the previous live streams where we talked about some of the so-called official atmospheric effects. Does anyone remember what they call it when a plane flies through the sky? Memory serves, we were talking about it with weather control, what that phenomenon was called. Yes, they say they use radio telescopes, Inferno 224, but what exactly do they use them and how do they use them? That's definitely a matter of debate, beyond any shadow of a doubt. Yeah, I know. It's how do we get our time machines up into second or third gear, like H.G. Wells, right? I swear sometimes y'all have the ability to see exactly what's coming up in the presentation or the images that we're going to look at, because yes, I do actually have something that says patent pending on it. So, oh goodness. Yes, true. The time travel machines. And that's another way to look at a portal there, Laura Painter. Absolutely. Yes. Does anybody know exactly what the significance of 88 miles per hour was in the DeLorean time machine? Well, hopefully it's a good portal that you enjoy, RB. This is true. And many, many, many that have been edited or changed over time. Cannot argue that point. Ah, the classic time tunnel. Yes, Jamie. One that was displayed in Doctor Who numerous times. Of course, I'm referring to classic Doctor Who. Nothing against the new one. I just haven't watched it. I grew up on Tom Baker and Sutek and those kind of things. But that's just me. Okay, see, again, I'm starting to wonder, do all of you have access to my computer and you're actually looking at the images? But I think it's just, certain minds are aligned certain ways. So, and this is another more of a direct spatial portal representation where you're talking about stepping from one physical space to another. And this is also what we see when we look at and think of portals. Yes, and it's definitely a wonderful way to think about how everything that we talk about and theorize is connected. Portals actually have that way of connecting things. Very true, Marine. It can be very dangerous, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why. It's questionable, but the idea behind it, I don't think is questionable. But don't worry, Adam. Our good friend Brian Dunning went out of his way to debunk it. So, of course, he hasn't debunked the fact that there's capital involved in the outcome of the US legal system. So maybe he'll get around to it. Not anytime soon. I don't know. Is the world beneath our feet a continuum? I think it may be in certain ways, and it may not be. E equals mc squared. Basic algebraic swapping of the terms means mass equals energy to speed of light to squared. Huge realization. This proves that many things are being obfuscated about energy. Oh, so true. And you know what else is true? Elusive truth is that It's one of those things that's dangled out in front of us. We like to think that math equations, numbers are objective, that they cannot have any sort of relative value to them. But I think that's a bit of a misnomer, if you'll pardon the pun on it. But it's something that we're led to think is objective and real, but how real are numbers? Am I even giving you accurate numbers about the population, just for example? Well, now we go to algebra. Yes, we have variables. Well, the inputs are variables themselves. So what's objective about that? That's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. Kindred Griffin, 88, time and space. Oh, so true. Ooh, the virtual gateway. That's a good example there, Wendy. And I kind of see this as looking at the virtual gateway. And remember how hard we had that brought upon us not so long ago. And then there's also the fantasy concept of portals, because prior to maybe we should say the mainstream advent of science fiction, or at least science fiction being brought about in the mainstream, although one could argue that it's reduced quite a bit, especially over the last 2 decades. You had this concept of portals in fantasy and fantasy works about being able to jump from different lands, different times, and different realities. And some would even say that's why fantasy is inherently linked to science fiction, although really at the end of the day, everything's linked. And then they just like to tell us, well, some things are fiction, not true. Some things are non-fiction, true. We love to play our word games, don't we? It's just like the word sanction, one of my favorite words. Big feet use portals. Yeah, probably so. Oh, that's a good one there, Brian. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. The Tao or the Tao of physics, depending on how you want to pronounce that one, because there's 10 million different ways to pronounce a single word. Nevertheless, it's a great work there, Stephen. Oh, yeah. The time warp again. Uh, okay, Adam, I'm not even going to read that one, but yeah, there's probably maybe a little something in that. I mean, are we to say that Albert Einstein was really the predecessor to Carl Sagan? Well, Carl Sagan would tell you that he was, but make of it what you will. The conundrum is if we can go through, what could come through? Oh, very true, Dwayne. And we've hinted at that. We've alluded to it many times. Granite plus gold plus aether. Oh, there's also another element too, but you got 3 of the 4. I'm impressed. So going on to some other examples of portals. Yes, A Wrinkle in Time. Madeline L. Engel, if I'm pronouncing her name properly, and I'm sure I'm not, but I'm talking about the book, of course, the 1960s science fiction book, where they had this little diagram about how a portal worked. You see, Mrs. What's It said, if a very small insect were to move the section of skirt in Miss Who's right hand to that in her left, it would be quite a long walk for him if he had to walk straight across. Swiftly, Mrs. Who brought her hand, still holding the skirt together. Now, you see, Mrs. What's It said, he would be there without that long trip. That is how we travel. And in Dune, in the Dune novels written by Frank Herbert, they called it folding space, something that the guild navigators were capable of doing. Although if you read the Legends of Dune, it tends to confuse that as well. But not that I'm denigrating Frank Herbert's son or Kevin J. Anderson, but I kind of like the way that Frank Herbert described it a little better. I don't think I'm in the minority there, but it doesn't matter. It's been a while, Jamie, but yes, a long time ago I did read The Forgotten Door, and that's a great. There's many great examples of portals. I just think this is one of the most quintessential examples right here, at least with the spatial aspect of it. Folding space and folding time. It's a good point, Laura. Can we even prove the speed of light in space or in water, with or without friction? It's questionable, Kitch. And is it just a concept that's supposed to be a limiting concept? That's what we don't know. And no one really can prove it because, well, we can't travel the speed of light. We supposedly have red shift and blue shift depending on something's moving towards us or away from us. Again, thanks to the good old Carl Sagan. But we really don't know. And some people even suggest, I'm not going to say who, that the speed of light might actually be the speed of processing in this reality, or if you want to view reality as a simulation. But that's just a theory. Yeah, I know we're kind of going all over the place here, but it's kind of what we have to do to understand really what portals are. Yeah, I really wonder, Skyfish. I really wonder whether it's in person or on camera. You do get some interesting perceptions from watching those. So yeah, or imagine if the speed of sound is actually the speed of light. How different would that make everything in physics? So very hard to say. Anyways, and here we have the more modern interpretation of what we think of as portals, especially with the whole concept of the black hole. And this is from the film Interstellar, where they tried to show the black hole as having more of a three-dimensional nature to it, of course, because, like we said, when you look at space, though, things like the moon and the sun look awfully two-dimensional. But that could just be the way they appear. Port tails. Ah, so true. SpaceX also looks like it cannot bust through the water. Yeah, they often do come back to the Earth, but at least it's a controlled descent, right, Robert? So they've got that down. Good question, Catherine. And is that anything real? Is the Large Hadron Collider something to do with that? Or is it just misinformation to keep us guessing? Hard to say, for all we know. Oh, that's a good one, Mr. Brightside. Yeah, instead we're traveling at the speed of science. I completely agree. I think that movie is kind of fake. Are you talking about Interstellar, though, Albie? Probably. It definitely tried to be high concept, but it droned a little bit for my liking. I always thought they had portals better depicted even in 2001, but that's good old Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. Some people definitely have an idea of what they're looking at and talking about. And now you have more of this modern take of portals where you could stand in one particular location and you could go through door one, two, three, four, five, and go to five entirely different locations. Now, right now, we're really only focusing on the spatial aspect, going from one space or one location to another location. But we have to remember there's other aspects, there's other dimensions, if you will, to portals. You could go to different realities, you could go to different times, or you could go to all three being different. And we'll look into that. I mean, right now, we're just looking at what portals are overall. Speed of fake moves faster than anything, right, Laura? Yeah, Bill and Ted. That's a good example there, Heidi. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Excellent adventure. And whatever the heck the third one was called, but go south or maybe go north. Maybe you'll find the same thing. Hard to say. It does feel like a house of mirrors. And some people even say that mirrors, Sky Sage, are portals in and of themselves. I mean, are they giving us a true reflection? Or what we're seeing in the mirror really us as we are? Or is it a representation of us? And if you recall, especially those of you who've been with the channel for a while, when we explored Prince of Darkness and the way mirrors played a factor in that, they acted as portals that allowed an entire entity, an anti god, if you will, to enter our reality from another reality. Wonderful existential horror from Master John Carpenter. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Forgettable film. Hey, Sooner West, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. You know what? Videodrome. I think I'm gonna have to do a whole exploration on that, Albie. And at the end of the live stream, we'll ask what you want to do for next week. I'm thinking about looking at a couple movies: Videodrome, The Matrix, and Mind Warp being three. Maybe we'll do four, but we'll see what you want to do, or if you want to go back and look at that Napoleonic era a little closer. So. Yeah, I think a lot of us feel that way, Kathy. Although, is it just we don't like the way we look, or is it because we're seeing something that doesn't make a lot of sense? Yeah, the Truman Show. Quite an interesting ending on that one, too. Yeah, virtual type visions or channeling. That's very true. And for those of you who are showing up, please hit the like button and support the channel. I appreciate it. This is a good one. Uh, Positioned on ley lines, maybe. Or maybe something even beyond ley lines. I mean, I don't want to discount ley lines, but one of the reasons that I haven't covered them so much is because in my explorations, I'm finding that there seems to be a bit of a relation that transcends ley lines. Now, it's not to say they aren't important, but it's to say that there's another way that they seem to operate and connect things together, and we'll get to that. Yeah, very likely that star forts are connected and built on the nexus points. Now, is it a geographical location or is it another spatial location that connects them that we don't entirely understand? That's what we don't know. So just all different ways to think on it and look on it. But I'm not discounting ley lines. I'm just explaining that what's interested me is the other ways that locations may be connected. So, what do I think trumps ley lines? Well, I'm getting to that, Robert. So just bear with me. Bear with me. Now, there was a film called Portals where it looked like they tried to pull out the monolith. It was, well, just in my humble opinion, it wasn't the most memorable of films, but they tried to show how portals would connect. And it does give you an example. It's something else that they're mentioning in the mainstream. And let's look at some examples of portals in film. Here we have a time portal that appeared in the film The Final Countdown, where a Nimitz class U.S. aircraft carrier was sent back from the very futuristic year of 1980 to 1941, where they had a chance to intercept the attack on Pearl Harbor using F 14 Tomcats that were much more advanced than the Japanese Zero fighters. And you might remember in an exploration where we talked about the only 3 decades of technological advancement between them. But then in the recent film Top Gun 2 Maverick, we had fifth generation fighters that an F 14 could hold its own against. Yeah, I know Maverick was in the cockpit, and it's the pilot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But still, the concept wasn't laughed out of the water. I mean, could you imagine Maverick and his P 51 Mustang trying to take on a fifth generation fighter or an F 14 for that matter? No, I can't either. But, think of it as you will. Yeah, the Philadelphia experiment. And that's a good one too, and that's one that actually goes through time and space. And the film from the 1980s was really good. That examined several different ideas. Yes. And who was it who was in that? That was Michael Pear, wasn't it? Yeah, and Nancy Allen from RoboCop. She was really good in the film as well. Oh, I forgot about that one, Sooner West. Otherworld, that was a good one. Back on the old Sci-Fi channel when they'd shown it, when it was actually the Sci-Fi channel. Great example. Yeah, they do. And we've seen some more use of them. Let's look at some more examples. Yeah, you can kind of look at it that way. Cool channel name. Yeah, Dreamscape. The dream actually going internal to use a portal. Yeah, that's a good one there, Wendy Barnes. Doctor Strange. Yeah, they used a lot of little portals, spatial portals and jumping portals. So some other examples here. Stargate, probably one of the more famous examples from the 1990s and currently. And Stargate's always interesting because of the fact that they talk primarily about spatial portals, although remember James Spader's explanation in the movie. Of course, there's a world of difference between the film and the long-running TV series and all its incarnations. Both were good in their own way. I wish Roland Emmerich would have stuck to these kind of films, but that's just my opinion. If he wants to get in a disaster, that's his affair. But I dare say that Stargate was his best film, at least my favorite. Oh, yeah, Quantum Leap, the original one. Well, that was a very creative series, too. Let's look at some more examples here before we move on. Sliders. Now, this was a 1990s TV series. I didn't really watch it that much. As I recall, I watched the first few episodes and it didn't really hold my interest. Not that it was a bad TV show. I just had other things going on at that time and devoted my attention to other things, like making sure I never missed Highlander. And looking back on it, aside from Adrian Paul, there really wasn't much to enjoy about Highlander, aside from some really good episodes. I know, man, sacrilege what I'm saying, but I'll give you my honest opinion. But back to Sliders, it did deal with the concept of portals with alternate realities. So here you're going beyond moving from one point to another in the same reality. Now you're moving from one point to another and in different realities or parallel realities. The mirror universe as they explored in Star Trek. Hot tub time machine. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Jumper, yeah, kind of. That's kind of a good example. No doubt about it. And who can forget the old Guardian of Forever from the classic Star Trek? Probably one of the earliest ideas of a portal. I mean, not the first one shown on TV or film, but one of the most memorable ones. And of course, I'll give credit to Harlan Ellison, although he passed away about 6 years ago. Harlan Ellison's the kind of guy that if you don't give him credit, he'd probably come back and haunt you, probably coming through a portal in some way. And I'm not even joking. I'm being quite serious. uh, Sci cult is just full of it. Yeah, it is in many different ways. Yeah, the Terminator. That's a good one. And then the episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they found the Iconians. That was a good one. All right. So before we transition, I'm just going to give you a moment. Let me leave us on a good image here. Black hole. And we'll hold on this image and we'll talk about this when I get back. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break because I want to reset your thoughts before we go to this next transition. So, 2-minute break. We'll be right back. All right, we are back and continuing on with portals. So, we alluded earlier to the existential terror or the danger of traveling through portals. And there's one film that I hadn't mentioned yet that dealt with a black hole, and that's called Event Horizon, late 1990s film, Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill, that involves a ship that's constructed specifically for the purpose of traveling through portals or black holes. And the danger is that they encounter another dimension, one that they call a pure chaos, the dimension they have to travel through, the wormhole, if you will. And this is something that's a recurring theme that we've had in several of our explorations, the existential horror that may be in this portal. And there's a lot of theories that state that it's encountering this particular reality, it's opening doorways to this particular reality that's allowed some of these, how shall we say, terrifying entities that you see pictured here to enter or influence our reality. Now, this might not be such an existential threat that you might think of, but one of the things we haven't explored yet on the channel, and we're going to be getting into, is the cosmic horror, as it's called, of H.G. Lovecraft. And this is what you're seeing here. And in a way, you can say that's the dimension of chaos that's encountered in Event Horizon, strongly implied to be hell or something much worse than hell. So, thoughts on that? Yeah, Lovecraft definitely had some interesting ideas. Time bandits, yeah. Time portals and space portals, no doubt about it. Liberate me. Yeah, no doubt. Liberate me. Yes. Liberate te. Save yourself. Good line from that film. Yeah, look at you go there, Atom Bomb. I had a feeling you'd have something like that. Sphere might be what I'm thinking of for the mirror ball. Yeah, quite possible. Yeah, it probably did, and it's funny you say that, Stephen, because they did have a scene that was supposed to show that, as they called it in the film, dimension of chaos, but they didn't get around to it. Time limitations. Now, people say the ending wasn't so ambiguous, but I think it was. Piercing the veil and waking things that slept undisturbed. Exactly. And that's something that we have recurring themes of. This comes up a lot with how we pierce the veil and what we see. Yes, it does. And you know where else you see it, Aaron's energy? You also see something like it in the Vatican, too, if you go back and look at the Vatican exploration. Yeah, in a manner of speaking, they are. Also, portals of the mind, too. So, anyway, this is the last example that we have of what are portals. And as we go on with this exploration, I want you to keep this concept in mind, this danger that we have of going to other realities, other times, or other spaces where we could actually give access to these entities, these creatures, if you will. And there are many films that allude to Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror, whatever you want to call it, where you have these sorts of entities. And yes, don't concern yourselves. There will be an exploration on H.P. Lovecraft. HG, HP, all the G's, P's. I think I said HG. So let me correct myself. H.P. Lovecraft. Many different authors go through my mind. So let's transition here. Now we're going to talk about portals through space, portals through time, and portals through reality. So give me 1 second here, and we'll bring up our next set of images. And I'm sure you're going to be familiar with this image that we're about to see. Share screen, and let me know when you can see this. And does anybody know what this object represents? Let me zoom in a little closer and get back to the comments. Does anybody know what this is? Tell vision. Yeah, that you could say that's a portal too, no doubt about it. It's a pretty good show too, Tracy. Ah, yes. You've all been around, you know. The Tesseract, the fourth dimension. Ah, that's very true too, Old World Billy Goat. It does have that representation. 4D cube in a 3D space. You are correct. Now, what I want you to pay attention to is these nexus points where the nested cube is connected. And remember, this is just a representation of the fourth dimension, the third dimension, because remember, we're stuck in the third dimension. We're just talking space here, the spatial dimension. But if you look at this, you have an idea of how it might look. Now, here's where things get pretty complicated, because imagine if we exist on what is shown here as a plane, although remember, just because it's fourth dimension, that doesn't necessarily say that the shape of the land has to be a ball, a plane, a flat land, a cone, whatever. It can be anything. You're looking at the overall relation of dimensions here. And if you just imagine yourself being stuck on one particular plane, you can actually follow it as it traverses through. And there's certain points where you can access the other planes physically. And there's a lot of people, and I'm not wondering if one of the reasons that it was mentioned when they say things like, well, space is unbounded but curved, or whatever are they talking about? There might be a little bit more reality to that than we like to think. It's just another idea of how existence may be. I'm not pushing anything. I'm suggesting ideas. Yeah, MC Escher had a lot of great theories about it. And if you ever saw the film Donnie Darko, they really display it pretty well in the concept of how spatial realities, how an alternate time can be formed. Although you really got to step back and read about that film. It's quite interesting. Tesseract is what many of these luminary stars in our skies look like. Yes, so true. When you look at them through the telescope or you look a little closer at them, you definitely get that impression. There's no doubt about it. Hey, New West Reset, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, the pilgrimage to the cube. Now, I think that's something that we get wrapped around the bend about because we do have strong emotions towards the shape of the land, but who's to say it can't be everything? That's always the interesting thing to me. Now, I'm not trying to push a tesseract. I'm really talking about the nexus points between the realities. That's what you see in a tesseract. That's why it interests me. Oh, good one there. Yeah, the Genesis wave. It does look that way, doesn't it? Or if you saw that one film. Now, here's the other concept, and we've seen this in several of these types of crosses, or the Dali crosses from artist Salvador Dali. And this was also used in Robert Heinlein's novel that he wrote in I think it was the 1930s, maybe the early 1940s, and he built a crooked house about an individual who built a house that was four-dimensional. Very interesting. And it looks like this Dali cross. And recall that we've seen representations of this on many explorations that we've done on several churches or cathedrals, or however you want to think of them, basilicas. Yeah, it is kind of addictive, isn't it? And it is odd too, isn't it? The Christianity unfolding of the 3D cubic QBQ realm. Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, the Dark City movie had that idea as well, Kevin. That's true. Oh, yeah, Stephen King, the Dark Tower series. Good example, EM. I'd almost left that out. And Stephen King went further with it. He also went with a concept of size and different relative scales, too, that were also with the spatial dimension. What if the shape of the realm is a dome? Yeah, that could be. We're hearing a lot of dome lexicon in weather reports lately, aren't we? We're under a heat dome, we're under a cold dome, we're under a rain dome. Beware the dome. Short film The Cube. Yeah, there was actually a couple films called Cube, prison escape films from Canada. They were pretty good. Cube and Cube, Hypercube. Those were very interesting. Oh, yeah, the Langoliers. Lost and Found History Rewritten. That's another good example. So, yeah, Stephen King alluded to it in several of his novels where he talked about going to different spatial dimensions. And so, think about that. Portals can give you access points. And here's a nice little depiction of how that house looked from And He Built a Crooked House. And if you ever read that novel, it's a very interesting thought experiment in how if you have a house laid out like this, what could actually happen to it. Really, really wonder where Robert Heinlein got these ideas from, especially when you look at his background. But we got a little exploration coming up soon where he's going to be featured. And now we go to the concept of the Bermuda Triangle. Now, our good friend Brian Dunning has thoroughly debunked the Bermuda Triangle, and it may well be true. In this current existence in this reality, there's really nothing going on there. I can admit that I've flown through there several times and have never really witnessed anything odd or strange. But there are numerous accounts of things that have happened, objects, ships, planes that have disappeared. Nobody ever found Flight 19. Nobody ever knew what happened to the USS Cyclops. There are some strange phenomenon that occur there, but how extensive is it? Is it something that's just in this reality? Was it something in another reality? Was a really good In Search of episode back in the day with Leonard Nimoy. Thoughts on the Bermuda Triangle? What if the realm is both, the flat curved into a sphere and beyond? Very possible, Stephen. I don't wonder that myself. I think that's a strong possibility. And that's another good point, Kevin. We can only see 4% of the visual spectrum, if that. And maybe there's much more that we can't see. Instead of it being 100%, it's actually 1,000%. We can only see 4% of that. 4/10, 400ths of a percent. Just imagine. Yes, the original film had some very interesting ideas to it, Julia. Another good example. Oh, Captain Morgan's. Oh, I see. So you had the wrong frequency then, Boston Freak Flag. You needed the right frequency. So, maybe you should have tried some Miller Genuine Draft or something, right? Okay. You're from Boston. Pats, right? Hawaii is an interesting location as well. And it's funny because they tend to flip it into movies in certain places. In that less than stellar film 2012, they even use Hawaii as an example of a spatial change. It's moved thousands of miles with that crust displacement theory. A lot of this stuff started to surface in the late 60s and early 70s, like the Bermuda Triangle, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot. When I was a kid, this stuff was everywhere. Yeah, that's true. And oddly enough, there seemed to be a lot of disclosure or a lot of open discussion about it, and it was handled as these are different ideas. It's theory and conjecture. We don't know. That's a great point, New West Reset. That's a really good point. And so going back to the concept of what the Bermuda Triangle may be, we'll go on to the next slide here, and please hit the like button. Now, this is where it's generally templated to be, but again, who knows if there's anything there? We don't know if there's anything going on. It could just be a coincidence. There's just a couple odd reports and some odd occurrences. But when you go back and you watch the original In Search of episode, there is something very, very strange that's going on with it. And so when you think about that with space and time and reality, The Ouija board in the paranormal realm. Yeah, and it might be a way of communication there, Robert, or it might even be set in your frequency. Who knows for sure? Oh, had to get a Planet of the Apes quote in there. Don't worry, no one will be saying that in the current Planet of the Apes films, will they? Ooh, a collapse in the Earth grid matrix. Yeah, maybe. Ah. Well, why do they even have to dump them? I mean, if we know they come back anyway, what difference does it make? I always found that interesting. But I've heard that before. Tried an exploration on it, it didn't go so well. So, anyway, you may recall from that In Search of episode, there was a caller when they were doing a call in show from a Fort Lauderdale radio station, vicinity Miami. Not Miami, Fort Lauderdale. I know there's a difference. But on the radio station, individual was doing a call-in show, and there was a random caller that came in. Now you can go and watch the In Search of episode. It's called Bermuda Triangle, and they've got the actual taping of what the caller said. I'll read it out to you. He calls in. There's one of you on the program who'll understand what I'm going to say. And every living thing on this planet has an aura. It is its communication with the millionth council who governs this planet. He didn't say millionth, he said millionth. I very distinctly remember it, but maybe I'm off. The area that you are discussing now is the aura of this planet. It is the communicative channel through which the millionth council governs this planet. Which council, sir? The millionth council. The millionth. Millionth. Anyone going into the area when the communicative channel is open do not disappear, but they're in the timeless void. They're all perfectly alive and well. It is the only area through which the council can communicate with this planet. Now, this could just be some crazy person who called in at some point in time, although they did analysis on the voice and indicated that the caller believed what he was saying. Wheel of Time has a couple good examples, doesn't it? That the caller really believed what he was saying. Yeah, it's kind of strange, isn't it? And they did a lot of analysis on it. Now, it seemed as though this was someone who had a pre-prepared write out. They had this written out, then they called into the show and reiterated this. But even so, these are interesting ideas because this alludes to all the things that we're talking about. A time warp, a timeless void, some existential power or some external power that's managing to influence things here, whether it's a cube, a plane, a ball, or whatever. Yeah, it's very, very, very similar to it, Jamie. That's a good example there. And again, coming down to frequency, and maybe that's what this is all alluding to. So, in this very short call, and in just two paragraphs, a couple sentences, this individual actually summarizes all these theories that we have about portals. Now, was it the Bermuda Triangle? Was it something else? Well, that we just don't know. Yeah, when did something become a whatever or however? Who knows? But there wasn't just the Bermuda Triangle. There's also the Devil's Sea or the Dragon's Triangle, as they call it, vicinity Japan. And supposedly they had similar instances, high risk areas, what they say. So it's sort of the equivalent, if you will, to the Bermuda Triangle over there south of Japan. But then there's this other odd occurrence. You may have heard of this recent discovery of all these islands that they didn't know that they had around Japan. Now, officially, they try to address this by saying that they already knew that this amount of land was out there. They just didn't categorize it as islands. So you'll see an article that tells you that they found thousands of islands, but then you'll see another portion of the article that tells you, well, yes, we knew all these islands were there. We just categorized them differently. So I don't know, is somebody backing off and doing cheetah flips from what they reported or trying to say that they didn't report the right thing? I'm not sure, but initially they reported that they found many new islands. And then they said, well, we already knew about the islands. We're just categorizing them as islands. We're just changing the boundaries because that's how we talk to people all the time, I guess. But a very interesting idea, isn't it? That they just found all these distinct islands vicinity Japan that they didn't know exist before. And why would you ever write or publish an article like that? Very strange. Picnic at Hanging Rock. Hey, welcome, CFH90. Thanks for joining us. There are several time slips throughout Europe, sightings of centurions. Yeah, true, Stephen. And if you want a fun intellectual pursuit to engage on, look at the difference between the time zones from Alaska to Eastern Russia. I'm serious. Do it sometime. It's Quite mind-boggling. Yeah, many have been struck off the maps. There's no doubt about that. And you wonder why. And then we have other accounts that we talked about, such as missing or invisible islands or High Brazil. We're told that one single island is a legend, it doesn't exist, but now we're talking about thousands of islands. So, which is it? Oh, it does. And I've got an exploration coming up on that particular location there, Julia. No doubt about it. And now we'll just look at time. And of course, I have to joke about this Star Trek, because Star Trek actually introduced the ideas of alternate timelines, alternate realities, alternate universes. You had the mirror universe. For the record, if anybody's wondering, yes, I prefer the prime timeline. And to me, that's Star Trek. Nothing against what J.J. Abrams attempted to do, into reference, I guess was okay. But the way they discussed it and they talked about it, and it all emanated from a black hole, a black hole. And then let's not forget that really cool supernova that somehow threatened the galaxy. Although, in defense of J.J. Abrams, you might remember in Star Trek The Next Generation, they talked about a supernova that destroyed the Takan Empire. So I don't know. It makes you wonder if, they changed their definition of what supernovas are supposed to be. Thought it just threatened a star system. Oh, no, it threatens an entire galaxy. It's just, whatever we say. But anyway, not to get off topic. But you have the different timelines. Although, if you're familiar with Star Trek, some people will say that Star Trek started to go off on a different timeline when First Contact came out. That was the one where they went back in time and they encountered the Borg. And a lot of people say that the timeline changed because the TV series Enterprise never really felt like it was on the same timeline as the original Star Trek. Now, you could just say, well, that's due to poor continuity in writing and so on and so forth. But there were a lot of odd things in Enterprise that didn't match up. For example, the Vulcans being, well, we'll just say very aggressive and violent. And that kind of matches what we see in the Kelvin timeline and whatever timeline the new series are supposed to be on. But anyways, it was just really odd. Certain things that they changed, certain continuities that they changed. And it all relates back to a portal. Yes, of course, it would be Star Trek. And yes, obviously, I had to throw it in there. Well, thank you, Donna Marie. I appreciate that. Yep, Captain Janeway. If anybody could get around a portal, it'd be Captain Janeway. And she'd have a good cup of coffee, too, while she did it. Hey, good to see you, Nana. Hope everything's going well. Oh, yeah, they did. And I honestly think those were better time travel stories. Again, just my opinion. There's nothing wrong with New Trek. They still engage with the science fiction ideas. I'll admit, I grew up with the original, so I prefer it. But that's just me. They had some good stories in Enterprise. It's just the continuity felt different. That's all I'm saying. Not saying it's a bad series or any of them are bad series. It's just it seemed like they had changed the continuity. But again, that just may be me. 5 cups and easy. Yeah. I always like that little poster of Captain Janeway. There's coffee in that nebula. I'm right there with you, Captain Janeway. Hey, Teresa. Yeah, the original TV show, I think, the original 3 seasons, they had the most science fiction ideas, and they also had the most old world ideas in it, too. Yep, and a lot of friends and people I know like the old stuff, so. Yeah, I got to admit, I never thought I'd be appreciating a photo from Star Trek 5, but you know what? I really did. It was good to see the old crew again, but anyways, okay, moving on. Now, something else to think about with this change in spatial reality. Talk about how rules of physics could change in different realities. And this is where it suddenly becomes possible, where when we look at the 5 eras theory at the end of this, you can see different spatial realities, different times. So suddenly you can have crazy things like this. Now, did anybody ever see the film The Quiet Earth? At the ending of that film, where you saw a total breakdown in the laws of physics, and you saw what looked to be Saturn rising on the horizon. Very intriguing ending to that film. And for some reason, a lot of people despise the fact that I like that film and I reference it. And I'm not sure why, but yeah, that's true. Oh, there's a good one. Yeah, James R. Kirk from the original pilot, Where No Man Is, well, not the original pilot, the second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before. But they tried to cheetah flip that by saying that old Gary there just didn't know Kirk's middle name, didn't want to accept that it was Tiberius. Uh, oh my goodness. There's actually a couple locations that you mentioned, Reality Checkmate. We're gonna try to explore one coming up here. We'll see if we can get access. But yeah, I think there might be a little bit more reality to that. Absolutely. And then, of course, that plot device, the Nexus from Star Trek Generations, although it was really more of a time portal that was just flying through space. I was not the biggest fan of Star Trek Generations. I'm just going to be honest. I enjoyed the film. It was good to see the Kirk and the new crew link up, but Anyway, concept of the Nexus, another portal, if you will. Just jump into it. And then the spatial portal that we see, although oddly enough, you'll see that there's a reference. I always like this image because it shows some of the old, what will be told are megalithic structures acting as a portal. Because oftentimes you see the sun or you see other celestial phenomenon in these portals. And then this whole concept. Now, you might remember there was a episode of Cosmos, and yes, I've watched Cosmos if you're not aware of that, where Carl Sagan talked about the existence of a three-dimensional object and a two-dimensional existence. Well, what would a four-dimensional object or life form look like in three-dimensional space? And the reality is you'd only see a part of it. And so, what if what we're seeing when we have accounts of what we think of as ghosts or entities or other things like that, we're really looking at something that's actually a life form from a greater dimension of a spatial existence? Now, I'm not saying that's what the final explanation is, it's just an example. Okay, I'm not here to tell you what to think or what to believe. I'm just introducing examples and different ways to think and look at this. What you want to believe or what you think is the binding theory behind all this, that's completely on you. But I've always found this interesting because I think of the example that old Carl Sagan used when he showed the apple passing through two-dimensional space, and they'd only see a part, a slice of the apple in two-dimensional space. Well, here you only see a part of the life form. It's just a triangle, when in reality, there's much more to his whole body that you can't even see. Very interesting ideas. Yes, 13 Ghosts. That is an interesting one, Jamie. I'm going to have to watch that one again. Thanks for bringing that up. And you know what, Big AB? We could all be, for all we know, something within us. We could even be more than four-dimensional life forms. No, not at all. DS9 was a great series. You can say whatever you want. Hey, Pete, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, that movie was great. Yeah, it does have an 80s vibe to it, doesn't it? All right, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Wormholes. Image transition here. And this is what most people are familiar with when they think of portals. So let me get this up. Wormholes. And I think you're all, well, relatively familiar with wormholes, but it's kind of a good way to go back and ground a little bit before we go off to the next portion of this exploration. Share a screen, and I'm sure everybody's seen this image. So, in all of our zeal to explore space, because we're told that we have vast distances between us and other stars, we need to find a way to travel faster than light. And this is the image you'll see. And a wormhole is a way to travel faster than light. Yeah, no doubt. Hey, Doc, good to see you. Great to have you with us. Hope all's going well. Hey, Mr. Beast fan. Yeah, I think there are a lot of connections. I mean, that's the reason why I want to watch it again, Noah Hyde. So, but anyway, back to the wormhole. Yeah, enter the void. That's a good way to look at it. But you'll see diagrams like this. So this shows you the flow of space, if you will, and you want to travel from Earth to Sirius. The wormhole gives you instantaneous transportation. Or as we saw in the example from A Wrinkle in Time or Dune, it's an example of folding space in a way. So they're not really folding space, they're merely providing a portal, a gateway that gives you instantaneous transportation. Or you could view it as hyperspace, like in the Star Wars universe, at least until you could just use it willy nilly, like in that last sequel movie, which we won't mention. But, the idea is very interesting. And the ability to travel instantaneously across that, wormholes tend to be the way that we're introduced to portals. At least it was the way I was. Now I can't speak for all of you, but, and who knows what world I'm from. Yeah, exactly, Wendy. Shortcuts. Great way to look at it. Oh, Tomorrowland. Yeah, another good one. Hey, Maggie. Thanks for joining us. Hope all's going well. Yeah, that's right, Jamie. Pinching the rubber sheet and pulling it under you, then letting go. So great ways to look at it. Wormholes, not portals, but that's how a lot of people think of as portals, Robert. You're right. They're not exact portals. They don't operate the exact way as portals, but that's how we're introduced to the idea. The sequel that shall not be named. Yeah, exactly. Planet Ohio. And then, it's interesting because they've talked about the concept of wormholes, and it doesn't provide you the ability necessarily to travel as extensively as a true portal does. At least what we think of as a portal. Although there were a couple of interesting episodes of Star Trek and other science fiction series where they looked at the idea and the concept behind it. And of course, I always like this one, the wormhole mouth, the throat of the wormhole, and then another universe. So here, you're actually talking about it being more to a real portal, not the wormhole that allows spatial travel, but the portal that allows going to another universe. Or, the universe where the bad Spock has a beard. Or J.J. Abrams made wonderful sequels, directed all three of them, and we think he's the greatest hero since the dawn of time, right? So if you ever think that things are looking bad, yeah, Alice is a good example. Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, Spore Drive. And where did they get that idea from? The tardigrade. I don't recall, Robert. And there were several books called The Multiverse where you're talking other realities. They say psychedelics fire up more of the brain, hence altering reality. Maybe a truer reality from the increased brain functionality. Maybe. And who knows what else is in some of those things as well. That's always the thing that we don't know. We have a good idea, we're told, but do we know for sure? I think there's some truth to it, and then I think there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. It's kind of like when you see those current commercials and they're telling you, this is what this wonderful thing will do for you, and these are the side effects. Enjoy. What you got here, Chassis? Across the river from me, I was walking this off limits road. My phone said I was 4 miles one way. I kept passing the same group of homes and never made it to town next to me. Time warp? Could be. Could have been in some sort of rift, or maybe you were in a place where you were in a little bit of a nexus point. Yeah, the magnetic torus. That's a good example. Yeah, sleeping. Some people would say that that's actually a passage through a portal, if you will. Hey, the Philosopher's Stone. Good to see you. Yeah, exactly. It's okay. You put it in the commercial, Boston freak flag, and then bang, it's okay to sell. Just as long as you talked about it. Yeah, you talked about it quickly, but it's all good. Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I've had one of those moments too. It's when I was driving back home from a lecture at a very, very late night. This was 2000, and I looked back at behind the car, and there was this bright flashing light of ball lightning. And then the next thing I knew, I seemed to be 20 miles further along on my route than I was. And I assure you, at that time, I was not driving a car that could go 20 miles in about 2 minutes. Not possible. But, could have just been a slip of the mind. Who knows? You're talking about it from first person perspective. Not going to say that I jumped through some kind of wormhole or a portal, but, a lot of people share stories like that. Oh, we can be deceived. We just have to admit it every day. Tracy, that's the key. Yeah, that's another way to look at it, Sky Sage. A glitch, or when you get to the edge of Dark City and you're trying to look out and you don't see anything. Yes, Robert. And I think there's a lot more to that than meets the eye. It's a little bit more common than we like to think, Sooner West. And I can remember many of the long flights I've been on where that's happened as well. Now, you would think that's more natural on a flight. You're not actually flying. But yeah, when you're driving, you like to think you're more engaged. It's more of a first person experience, but then you don't remember it. It's kind of strange. Ah, yes. Mr. Peabody and Sherman. That's a good one. Well, and that's another element to it, Julia. Rational mind does dismiss a lot of things. And how much do we see from the mainstream is about getting us to dismiss things? I mean, look at how Brian Dunning operates. If you don't do what he tells you to do or believe what he tells you to believe, he's going to call you a conspiracy theorist. And you don't want to be called a conspiracy theorist. So just do and believe what he wants you to do and believe. And granted, that's a simplification and a generalization, but that's a lot of ways that people operate. I'm just going to insult you unless you think what I think. It's that simple. I can kind of understand why Chassis has a way of catching your attention, right? Just like Wesley Crusher nearly destroying the ship in the first missions, right? He has a way of catching your memory. You don't want to do it again. Mine could have literally become supercharged by ball lightning. Yeah, that could be. A lot of things changed during that time, Aether, no doubt about it. For me, and then they changed again a couple years later, but who knows? One step to walk a block. Yeah. And there's lots of people who share stories like that, Adam, and I think there's a little bit more reality to it than we like to believe. Well, I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you joined us, big dog. So thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Anyway, so that's it for wormholes. And now, the moment you've really been waiting for, let's look at some portal tech. That's right, technology to open portals, or at least technology that may open portals. Now, does anybody remember this image? Give me 1 second, share screen, and here it comes. And there you go. Does anybody remember seeing this image before? And you might recall we looked at it on some of the technology explorations. Well, people just have to be open and not ridiculed for sharing their experiences. There's a reason why we get ridiculed a lot. Hey, Philip, good to see you. Yes, Robert, you are correct, sir. That is India. Well, what does it look like? Ah, yes, it does look a lot like the interior of CERN, doesn't it? This is from India. But when exactly was this carved or formed? Who did it? Is this just a structure or is this technology? And then, of course, we look at our layout of CERN. I mean, what does CERN actually do? Does it do anything? Is it just something to draw our attention while there's other technological devices out there that may look that way? Could be possible. Don't know for sure. But it's an interesting thought and an interesting theory. Why are we colliding together particles to understand certain things? What if we're doing something else? What if in reality we're generating some sort of portal? I mean, that's what they say we're doing in a way. Yeah, that's true, Chassis. I hadn't considered that. No, we don't, Angelo. We don't know. We just have an idea. Yeah, isn't it odd how it does look like the drive system, especially when it's aligned? That's a good point, Stephen. No, not that we know, but maybe we broke through something else for all we know. Hyperdimensional space gates? Yeah, without a doubt. Well, what's interesting, Aether, is they say they've got versions of colliders all over the place. At least that's what they say. But again, who knows for sure? And a lot of people pinpoint the start of a lot of observed Mandela effects to when they started flipping that thing. Now, who knows for sure? Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. We just don't know. But just imagine if that's really what the intention behind this technology is. You're just trying to open a portal. I mean, space technology, particle collision. No, we want to open a portal. That's what we're really trying to do. Yeah, here's a good one from the patent office. Electrodynamic field generator. Because remember, this is all you need for a patent, just a little diagram, and then someone will insult you when you say that, well, of course the patent office could show you how to build an interocitor. If anybody knows what movie that's from, you let me know. But yeah, I got my patent for my interocitor, and then I got my patent for my dynamo, and that's all you need, just a one perspective drawing and a couple things, and bam, you got a patent. It's an electrodynamic field generator. What does one do with an electrodynamic field generator? Ah, Shiva. Yeah. Hard to say, Stephanie. they may well be trying to open portals, or maybe it's just misinformation that we're being intentionally given. We don't know. I mean, I can assure you I haven't stood there when they collided particles together and opened portals, but there are some odd references to it, and the ideas are always interesting. Yeah, quite a coincidence that he did run a patent office, right? Quantum entanglement, yes. Who knows? Maybe that's all life really is, just a big series of quantum entanglements. Well, and I think there were many times, and who's to say that one of the causes of resets wasn't opening portals? You know, it's one of the theories that we have. And then you might remember this, the Florence Cathedral in Florence, Italy, and this interesting perspective that they have on the floor. So, what's this supposed to represent? Why were they doing this in the Middle Ages, before the Renaissance, even? Somebody was very intelligent and very mathematically inclined during a time frame when we're told people were superstitious and it was illegal to read the classical Greek texts because, they didn't want people laughing, as they showed us in The Name of the Rose. But during that same time frame, they were able to construct this. Makes sense, doesn't it? And then, of course, you look at the portal at the top of the same building, looking up in the dome. So, a very interesting couple of images. And it's one of the reasons why there's another whole dimension to these architectural explorations that we do. Yeah, it could, for all we know. Should go there in person, Wendy. You can feel like you can fall into something. And if you want to talk about feeling like you're going through a portal, that's one way to do it. And maybe that's what it's all about, compelling the mind to think that it is. Oh, the grid. It does look that way, doesn't it, Sky Sage? Although, which grid exactly? Ah, exactly, Noah. Every time you see one of those old astrological symbols or a zodiac, whatever you do, don't step on it. Don't stand in the middle of it. Ooh, a lament configuration. Yeah, it does give that impression, doesn't it? I could see that too, Jamie. That's a good observation, especially with the surrounding designs. Same floor, and we won't even talk about the fact that the structure is held up and is going to be 1,000 years old before too long, although who knows how old it really is. Yeah, it's the same feeling I get whenever I go into a state capitol and I look up in the dome. You kind of get that same impression. And then here is the diagram that shows you all the designs of the floor of the Florence Cathedral. So what happens when you stand here at a certain time of day and you have certain thoughts? I don't know. Is there more to it? Do you need to hold something? Do you need to have access to something? Can it act as a portal? Is it an energy generation device? Does it renew the individual spirits within humans? Could it do all the above and more? Sure. For all we know. Hey, Christopher, good to see you. Umbrella Corps from Resident Evil. That's a good one. Well, that's true. But would you be surprised to know that there are some very realistic ideas in Umberto Eco's book? I think what he did was he hid truths across different books. There's many themes of that happening. The concept of a library that actually has esoteric knowledge in it that we're not supposed to access. And that's about all I can say. Ah, yes, Carmen. Very interesting novel, too. It does look like cymatics, doesn't it? Maybe there's another whole dimension of cymatics we don't understand either. This is the outside of the cathedral, and we always call these portal windows that all go around the dome, and that tends to be where you see the portal windows. And remember, this was constructed before the Renaissance officially. And look at what they could do. Yeah, bubonic plague and all those troubles, they're just that. They're troubles. But, this is Italy. We can do anything at any time. Never mind the logistics or the construction behind it. I mean, just look at the unbelievable beauty. Who could do something like this today? Get enough contractors, can we do it today? And everyone will tell you, well, yeah, sure, we could do it today. We just need enough money. We never have enough money. National debt knows no limits, but we never have enough money. So Just don't ask those kinds of questions. Well, thanks, big dog. I really appreciate that. And I am going to mention it. So, donkeys and hamster wheels. Yeah, that's what it feels like at times, doesn't it, Jamie? Of course. We've got AI. That's why we can do anything, right, Julia? Yeah, do they even need to bother printing it, or do you just type a number somewhere, right, sooner? I've wondered that myself. Is it really that simple? Uh, yeah, the audience is part of the band. That's what generic used to look like. I agree. It does. And you know what, Robert? I wish that was an easier one to do some explorations on. I'm trying to find out a way to do it. Don't worry, I'm not giving up yet. And then you may have seen this wheel before. Although, is that really what it is, or is it representing greater technology? That's always intriguing when you go and you look at these older structures and you consider their intricacy and all the fine detail that they put on them. And you always get the impression that they represent something so much more technologically advanced, not just in their construction, but as an apparatus themselves, much like with the star forts. There you go, Philip. Let's get rolling in Minecraft. We could do it there. Yeah, the wheel of life. But what does that really represent? What's that really telling us it actually is? Yeah, and it's actually a lot more common than we like to think. Nah, I don't have a wheel. Could be a space drive. Could be something that opens portals. Yeah, petrified wood, no doubt. And then here's another perspective of the Florence Cathedral. And I always like this one because here you can really see it for what it is. It's a two-dimensional floor, but it's alluding to a third dimension on a two-dimensional floor. And notice that in these structures, we always have that extension of spatial dimensions. Yeah, it seems to be that way, Stephanie. Hey, Risha. Yeah, remote control, or it could actually be an advanced computer. Or again, it could just be some gears that somebody found and they wanted to tell us that. But I have a feeling that they did find some more details with that, and that's why they have to say that. They have to admit that it is an advanced device that doesn't make sense. Oh, what does that OPA mean? Good question. We'll be coming back to that, Julia. Keep that in mind. Outside is better than the inside. Yeah. Although if you actually go inside and then you can look in all directions, it's a very unique structure. And it is one of those structures that I will admit the outside does compete with the inside. And then of course here you have the actual CERN with the image from the temple in India. And you can see the similarities. Coincidence or, hard to say. And I know you'd like a more detailed image, but good luck with that. Yeah, isn't it? Just another one of those little coincidences. Pay no attention to it. Willy Wonka's TV portal. Oh, yeah. Well, thanks, Marine. Like I said, and I'd love to do it with high def images, but we know what would happen if I tried that. So we're not going to try it. Yeah, and honestly, you can take a look at the images yourself, and I'll post them in the usual location, and do your own analysis. Yeah, it does have a kaleidoscope feel, doesn't it? And then you look at some of the other structures in the apparatus behind it. And so just think, I mean, is this really doing what we're told it's supposed to be doing? Is this particle collision? Is this just for studies? How do universes form? Or are we really trying to open portals? Are we punching a hole through the very fabric of our reality? Whether it's, hey, QCZ, it's good to see ya. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, they do, don't they, Adam? And the changing iris as well. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Could be, Vaughn, or the past for the future. Because again, how real is time? Does time really exist, or is it just something that's imposed on us? Now, people will say, well, you get older, you gain experiences, but is that time or is that something else happening? Don't know for sure. And then, of course, there's all the portals that we have on all the structures and the explorations that we do. Very interesting, isn't it? Like, are these temples? Are these something else? What's exactly going on here? Or do these represent technology? And then here it is again, another portal that's in a church, but they call this a portal. Well, why is it a portal and not just a door or gateway? No, it's a portal. And you see this in many locations. Like, well, of course, they just want to represent that you're going into a religious structure and make you feel very pious when you walk into it. Sure, we can accept that explanation. And yeah, it's going to make you feel that way. But why does it exist this way? I mean, even this. I mean, what a compilation you have of construction styles here. And what's the structure actually been through? Don't worry, we'll be exploring it, and I'll have it up on Reddit so you can reverse image search it. We're not going to talk about it now because it's going to get us off topic. And then another view of that OPA. And I wanted to include this because it's a different perception, a different perspective of Florence Cathedral. Because that cathedral is something else, let me tell you. Yeah, very strange creatures, no doubt about it. Or the future is our past, or it's just one big snake that's eating its tail constantly. Oh, yeah, time is the nucleus, so. But anyway, that's the last image there. So let's go up and go to the final portion, the concept of death. And we'll get our next images up here. And here we go, share. And voila. And you have an account here. Her strength and spirit were both dripping away, leaving her empty inside. She could feel her filth and hunger, and her body was protesting violently about her long period of tension and drug and alcohol abuse. Now, I picked this one because anybody who's been exhausted or been in a situation where they felt like their physical body was going to expire, and I think a lot of us have been in that position, maybe not, but I know I have a couple times. You have that feeling. You feel like everything's just draining or dripping away. And it's really strange. And what does it actually represent? Yeah, I think there's a lot of indications that time is indeed illusion. Inferno. Hey, thanks, QCZ. I appreciate that. And welcome to the new members. Could be both, for all we know. Vortex or a portal. And let's get on with that. The very concept, hold on, we'll get back to it. The very concept of leaving one's physical body. And so think about that. And is death a portal in and of itself? We have a spirit. Do we have another existence, or are we just unplugged from the reality? Do we go to a different simulation? Do we find out what it is? And so you find out exactly how portals relate into this. This is how we can explain why we may have Art Deco, why we may have different architecture, why we have overlapping timelines. What if every reset is just an opening of the portals? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, and new members, go ahead and enjoy the perks and benefits. So, and again, thank you very much, QCZ. Yeah, some people would say that, but I think we're much more. Pure astral release. Yeah, I think that's exactly what we come. So anyway, I think that's about all we have for this particular week. No, and I think that's something we can prove. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this exploration. I got another one coming out tomorrow, and we're going to do some different boots on the ground explorations coming up this week. So I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you joining me for this exploration on portals. And I'll probably be publishing a little poll asking if you want to look at old world and film again, or if you want to look at that Napoleonic era. So it was good to see all of you. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful week. And with that, I just ask that you all hit the like button before we sign off, and enjoy yourselves and have a wonderful week. Thank you.